Before we get into today's show, let me tell you about the latest deal from Mike Lindell, MyPillow. Once again, the big box stores have canceled their orders simply because they don't agree with Mike Lindell's politics. They don't like it because he supports President Trump. Well, he's going to pass that savings on to you. No more middleman. And boy, does he have some great deals on the Giza Dream sheets and the Percal bed sheets. Listen to this. Giza Dream queen size, normally $139.98. Your wholesale price, $69.99 when you use promo code Joey. King size, only $79.99. The Percal queen size, normally $89.98. Your wholesale price, $29.98 when you use promo code Joey. Just call 1-800-893-4059 or go to MyPillow.com. Always use promo code Joey. Free shipping options available. This allotment's not going to last very long. When they're gone, they're gone. MyPillow.com. Promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Welcome and thank you for spending a few minutes of your day with me. We have a lot to cover. During a high-profile Oval Office meeting yesterday, El Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele made headlines by telling President Trump that he has 350 million Americans to liberate and tells the president how he can help. Also, in response to a question from CNN on the return of the recently mistakenly deported MS-13 gang member, President Bukele laughed and said he would not be freeing a terrorist in his country. As expected, China has suspended rare earth exports, kneecapping U.S. industries reliant on Beijing's monopoly. Blue Origin founder and billionaire Jeff Bezos was seen taking a tumble in Texas as he walked around the new Shepard space capsule after it had returned with his fiancée Lauren Sanchez aboard, along with pop star Katy Perry and others. Harvard University says that they will keep their DEI programs and reject the Trump administration's demands at the risk of losing billions of dollars in federal funds.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but, you know, they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
During a high-profile Oval Office meeting yesterday, El Salvadorian President Bukele made headlines when he told President Trump that he has 350 million Americans to liberate, a nod to Trump's campaign promise to end crime and lawlessness in the U.S. Now, Bukele praised Trump's leadership and said that El Salvador could offer help, drawing comparisons between his own country's dramatic turnaround and what he sees as needed reforms in the U.S.
It's an honor to be here in the Oval Office with the President and leader of the free world. We're very happy. And we're very eager to help. We know that you have a crime problem, a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we will do it. And we actually turned the murder capital of the world, that was the journalists call it, right? Murder capital of the world, into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. And, you know, sometimes they say that we imprisoned thousands. I like to say that we actually liberated millions. So, you know, like...
That's very good. Who gave him that line? Do you think I can use that?
Yes. And in fact, Mr. President, you have 350 million people to liberate. Yes. But to liberate 350 million people, you have to imprison some. You know, that's the way it works, right? You cannot just, free the criminals and think crime's going to go down magically. You have to imprison them so you can liberate 350 million Americans that are asking for the end of crime and the end of terrorism. And it can be done. I mean, you're doing it already. And I'm sure that people have seen the change in the streets. A long way to go because you're just initiating your second term.
Trump clearly liked what he was hearing. He nodded in agreement and pointed to their partnership in deportation flights. The Trump administration, of course, has worked with El Salvador to send back hundreds of migrants, including members of the notorious Tren de Aragua gang. They sent them to the country's high-security prison known as the Terrorism Confinement Center, CCOT. Trump has previously slammed Biden's catch-and-release border policies and Democrat-led bail reform efforts, blaming them for spikes in violent crime. The conversation also shifted to cultural issues. President Trump asked President Bukele if El Salvador allowed men to compete in women's sports or to box women. Bukele replied, "That's violence." Trump added, "That's abuse of a woman," saying many in the U.S. fight to the death to defend what he called radical gender policies. Bukele criticized the modern feminist movement for reversing course, saying a decade ago we were pushing for laws to protect women from being abused by men. Now some of the same people are trying to backtrack, he said. He pointed to the women in his cabinet, noting proudly that they weren't DEI hires. President Trump echoed sentiment, naming Pam Bondi, Attorney General, Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Secretary, Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, as key women in his administration. He said, the most powerful woman in America, in the world, speaking of Ms. Wiles, I think she probably is. Ms. Noem, who visited CECOT last month, thanked Bukele and said that the Trump administration was sending a message of consequences to would-be criminals and gang members. President Trump followed up with another shot at Biden-era immigration policy, accusing the previous administration of letting criminals pour in from around the world, he said, from prisons, mental institutions, rough parts of Europe, South America, Asia, you name it. Pressed on how many illegal immigrants his administration plans to send to El Salvador, President Trump did not give a number but said as many as we can get out of the country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden. He even left the door open to deporting violent U.S. citizens or naturalized immigrants to El Salvador, though he noted that Attorney General Pam Bondi and DOJ officials are still reviewing whether that's legally possible. So during the questioning, and there were a lot of questions, President Trump repeatedly needled CNN and its primetime anchor, Caitlin Collins. Collins was trying to ask a question of the El Salvadoran president about the mistaken deportation of El Salvadoran national Kilmar Abrego Garcia. As Collins tried to get in a remark, President Trump said he wanted to hear a question from the, quote, very low-rated anchor. Collins ignored it and asked Trump if he would ask Bukele to assist in bringing back this MS-13 gang member who was mistakenly deported. President Trump directed Attorney General Pam Bondi to answer Ms. Collins' question, who said that Mr. Garcia was illegally in the country and had previously been ruled by immigration courts to be a member of the transnational terrorist group MS-13, and said it's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. Here's the exchange.
Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Thank you, President. Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
Trump couldn't help himself. He interjected that CNN asked with a slant because they're totally slanted. I mean, I don't know why Ms. Collins or any CNN anchor would want to be in the Oval Office knowing that Trump is going to laugh at them, is going to make fun of them in front of the entire world. Trump said they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. Now, White House advisor Stephen Miller was also asked by Trump to respond to Collins, saying that it was and he said it was very arrogant for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens. Here's that exchange.
So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to ask for it to get it back?
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
in our favor.
In our favor, against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
no version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
And Ms. Collins wasn't finished there. Coming up, we'll tell you what the El Salvador president said when she asked him directly. Hi, Joey Hudson here. You know, this spring there's a renewed energy and focus on efficiencies, and shaking up unhealthy habits don't serve us well. There's so much chatter about making America great again, but it starts in your home with you being the best, healthiest version of yourself. And PhD Weight Loss is doing their part because for the first time ever, the first 11 callers get 2 free weeks added to your weight loss program. That is huge. PhD's out to prove that you don't need Big Pharma to reach your goals. It just creates dependency, not long-term change. Dr. Ashley Lucas researched weight loss trends for years and discovered a scientifically proven way to retrain your body to burn fat efficiently without hunger, extreme exercise, or dangerous medications. PhD clients watch their belly fat disappear, their energy skyrocket, cholesterol and blood pressure normalize without starving themselves. I lost over 30 pounds and I've never felt better. So call now and mention promo code Joey for my 2 weeks for free with my program. Call 864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900 or go to myphdweightloss.com. During yesterday's White House meeting in the Oval Office with President Donald Trump and the president of El Salvador, President Bukele, Caitlin Collins from CNN just would not let it go as to whether or not the U.S. was going to try to facilitate the return of the suspected MS-13 gang member who was mistakenly, it's been admitted that it was a mistake, that he was deported, but he was deported, and Abrego Garcia. And so now the left is just deadbeat on getting him back. And this was part of Caitlin Collins' whole round of questions yesterday as she asked President Trump if, in fact, that was going to be facilitated. Now, here's a little bit of the history of that. A court ordered the U.S. government to pursue, quote, steps to facilitate the return of this man who was removed last month. The Justice Department has asserted that federal courts do not have the authority to dictate to the executive branch how to handle foreign relations, and that the order only requires removal of domestic obstacles that would hinder the man's ability to return to the U.S. The Supreme Court upheld the decision by U.S. District Judge Paula Zenas, saying that Abrego Garcia had to be returned, saying it properly requires the government to facilitate Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he been improperly sent to El Salvador. However, the Trump administration has framed the decision as a victory that affirmed the president's authority over foreign policy. Collins wasn't finished as she asked the president. The president had Attorney General Pam Bondi explain why the United States would not go out of its way to have him returned. The Attorney General said he should have been deported. He would have been deported eventually anyway. It just happened a little sooner by mistake. The president also had Stephen Miller explain why the U.S. was not going to, again, go to extremes to get him returned, saying that it was now an issue with the El Salvador's government. He's a citizen of El Salvador. He's in one of their prisons. If they want to return him, it's their option. Well, Collins wasn't happy with that. She kept pushing. So finally, President Trump allowed her to ask the El Salvador president directly if, in fact, El Salvador would return Garcia to the U.S. Here's his response.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. We're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Mark.
President Trump, these are sick people. He's referring, of course, to CNN. Again, I don't know why Caitlin Collins would even want to put herself in that position, but she did. Blue Origin founder and billionaire Jeff Bezos was seen taking quite the tumble in Texas yesterday as he walked around the new Shepard space capsule after it returned with his fiancée aboard. Lauren Sanchez, pop star Katy Perry, and others were on this all-women flight. It had Gayle King, film producer Carrie Ann Flynn, NASA rocket scientist Aisha Bowe, and civil rights activist Amanda Nguyen. After the roughly 10-minute flight, Bezos and others were seen walking around the space capsule as it was out in the middle of a desert in Texas. Bezos, in particular, was seen touching the capsule. He seemed to be running around the capsule, looking through the windows when he stepped into a ditch and just fell flat on his face. The Amazon mogul quickly got back to his feet, continued to the door of the pod, where he eventually greeted Sanchez with a hug and a kiss. The New Shepard rocket, which launched from Blue Origin's launch site 1 in Texas, it's a fully reusable suborbital rocket system. During yesterday's flight, the 6 astronauts traveled above the Kármán line in a capsule and had a brief period of weightlessness before returning to Earth. The Kármán line is located 62 miles above Earth. It demarcates the edge of space. So they were right on that edge, right on the border. Prior to the launch, the company had conducted 10 human flights with New Shepard since 2021, with its 10th occurring in late February. Its Blue Shepard program has 30 flights total under its belt, according to Blue Origin. And these women wanted to be the first, all female. Now, they didn't really navigate the capsule. It was all automated. They were just passengers. But still, that's pretty wild. You know, Oprah Winfrey was just gushing and going on and on about her buddy Gayle King being aboard this flight. Now, it was a publicity stunt. So to say that these women really achieved something remarkable, I think, is probably a bit of a stretch. Again, they had nothing to do with it. They were just passengers. They got on in the capsule. It blasted off, and it was controlled from Earth. But still, it's a big deal. I'm not going to discount it. I guess it's a pretty big deal to be on the first all-female flight like that. Blue Origin has also been creating a 2-stage New Glenn rocket, which achieved its first launch in mid-January. The company has described that rocket as crucial to its efforts to establish sustained human presence on the moon. And look, it's a private race to space between Blue Origin and billionaire Elon Musk's SpaceX. It is a billionaire's toy. And I guess if you have that kind of money to blow, you can spend it any way you want. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Well, if the suspense has been killing you as to whether or not Representative Ilhan Omar is going to run for the U.S. Senate, don't worry. She put an end to the speculation that she might run for Minnesota's open Senate seat in 2026. Instead, she says that she's just going to seek re-election to the U.S. House. She's going to stay put. She's going to try to retain her seat in the state's 5th congressional district. In a statement at a news conference on public radio, she said, at a time when our rights are under attack, it is more important than ever to fight back against the chaos, corruption, and callousness of the Trump administration. She emphasized a grassroots-driven campaign, saying, in Minnesota, we know that organized people will always beat organized money. Omar, who easily defeated her last Republican challenger by roughly 50 points, had been floated as a possible contender for Senator Tina Smith's seat. Smith announced in February that she will not seek re-election, citing personal reasons and a desire to spend more time with her family. Her decision opened the door to speculation about who might step in 2026. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan quickly entered the race, making her the most prominent Democrat candidate so far. Governor Tim Walz has opted not to run, leaving Flanagan, who would become only the 5th U.S. Senator of Native American heritage if elected, with a strong early advantage. Omar's announcement comes as her fellow squad member, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, faces her own speculation about a possible 2028 Senate run against Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in New York. On the Republican side, 2 candidates have already jumped into the race. Retired Marine and Navy SEAL Adam Swartz, who described the campaign as his most important mission, and former NBA player Royce White, who previously lost the GOP primary in 2024. The 2026 race will be Minnesota's first open Senate seat since 2006, when Amy Klobuchar won the seat vacated by then-Senator Mark Dayton. Interestingly, Al Franken, who resigned in 2018 amid a scandal, has already endorsed Flanagan as well. So with Omar out of the race, all eyes are now turning to the Democrat field to see how that shapes up. And look, I don't know. I don't know if it's realistic to think that a Republican could win that. Probably not. But with the right candidate, you never know. Kevin O'Leary isn't holding back when it comes to China and the ongoing tariff standoff. The Shark Tank star and investor threw down on Fox Business, warning that if China doesn't come to the table soon, they could end up virtually screwed, he said. Speaking with Stuart Varney on Varney & Company, O'Leary said that the situation with China is still the biggest issue in the global trade conversation. He said, even though I want 400% tariffs, that's just a bombastic 100% plus wipes out all trade, he said. O'Leary said that at some point, Chinese President Xi has to take an olive branch that's been offered twice this past weekend from Trump. President Trump's April 2nd executive order declared a national emergency over unfair trade, global trade practices. It has launched a wave of tariffs that has created a roller coaster ride in financial markets across the world. Some tariffs were as high as 125%. There's confusion right now over what exemptions could be included. For example, at one point, it was believed that smartphones and laptops and some electronics were exempted. Over the weekend, the Trump administration seemed to clarify that no, they're not. They were exempted from these latest tariffs, but there's some additional tariffs that will be taking effect soon that will apply to smartphones like the iPhone. O'Leary made it clear that he's all for China getting hit hardest, arguing that Beijing doesn't actually have the leverage many people think it does. For example, China holds $760 billion in U.S. Treasury securities, but O'Leary says dumping those wouldn't help him. He says he doesn't have the options to sell T-bills. That will enhance the price of his currency and make his products even less competitive worldwide. That will devastate his economy, which is already on the brink. Bottom line, O'Leary said, the U.S. has the stronger hand. Almost 39% of China's exported goods are consumed by Americans. If she can't sell the stuff, those people don't have jobs, and that's going to be a bad outcome for him, really bad, and he knows it. O'Leary's take, Trump's tariff leverage is real, and unless China comes to the negotiating table soon, they're looking at serious economic fallout. Also, speaking of China, it was announced that they have stopped shipping some of the heavy rare earth metals and magnets critical to U.S. production of everything from cell phones to fighter jets, as Beijing's trade war with Washington continues for, 2 weeks now? As a result of the tariffs, China is no longer exporting 7 heavy rare earth metals processed exclusively by the Chinese, as well as heavy rare earth magnets, of which about 90% of the world's supply are also synthesized on Beijing's territory. The export halt applies to all countries, but access to elements like, and I can't even say some of these words, dysprosium, yttrium are critical to U.S. industry, especially in the tech and electric vehicle, aircraft, and defense sectors, according to Drew Horn, who served as a top U.S. official on strategic minerals and energy supply chain developments in President Trump's first administration. He said rare earths are in everything. The EV and auto space, everything from cell phones, defense key components, and space travel. China, Horn added, has essentially created an all-powerful monopoly with them. Instead of only hiking the price to U.S. companies, Beijing appears to be just stopping the exports altogether at this point to try to create leverage against Washington. Horn said the Chinese have been threatening this because they do have that leverage to basically cut off supply, cut the world off, and which essentially cuts us off through all sorts of different means, and now they're doing it, he said. Beijing has previously threatened to stop shipping the rare earth elements during Trump's first administration, with President Xi making a public visit to a magnet factory in Guangzhou during a time of tense U.S. trade relations just recently. Becoming independent, or at least less reliant on China for rare earth, has been a growing interest of Trump since before he took office, and that's what he says he's going to do now. And of course, another part of this is the relationship with Ukraine. If we could eventually get the deal with Ukraine, get a ceasefire there, have that region stabilized, Ukraine, we're told, is a huge resource for these rare earth minerals. Horn believes that processing facilities could be up and running before 2026. He says, I think there's need to be industry support and buy-in. Saying, I'm not an advocate of eternal government subsidies or artificial industries, but what I think needs to be done, there needs to be a variety of incentives, protective measures, tax incentives, funding grants, loan guarantees to allow some of these new industries to be able to get up and running more quickly. Horn warned that such incentives and safeguards are needed to shield potential American competitors and their customers from Chinese retaliation. Harvard University announced that they are going to not comply with Trump administration's demands to end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs or expel pro-Palestinian demonstrators as well. Last week, the White House informed Harvard that the school would lose federal funding if it did not abide by a series of demands concerning protesters and DEI programs. The Hill notes that Columbia University caved to the demands and still had its federal funding frozen and faced further cuts. So I guess Harvard is willing to take the risk. Harvard University President Alan Garber said in a message to the Harvard community, no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. Well, President Garber, you're probably right. I would agree with you. But it doesn't mean that my federal tax dollars have to keep supporting you either. And if you think you can do what you've been doing on your own dime and not need the federal tax dollars, have at it. I don't care what you do at Harvard. President Garber added that the demands are an unprecedented attempt to control the Harvard community and said the government's letter makes clear that the intention is not to work with us to address anti-Semitism in a cooperative and constructive manner. Although some of the demands outlined by the government are aimed at combating anti-Semitism, the majority represent direct governmental regulation of the intellectual conditions at Harvard, he argued. A letter from the university's attorneys to the Trump administration accused the government of attempting to violate the First Amendment and invade university freedoms long recognized by the Supreme Court, they argued. The letter added, Harvard remains open to dialogue about what the university has done and is planning to do to improve the experience of every member of its community. But Harvard is not prepared to agree to demands that go beyond the lawful authority of this or any administration. What do you think? Should all federal funds that Harvard is receiving now be cut, just eliminated? Let them try to do this on their own? I mean, I agree. They have freedom of speech. They should be able to teach whatever they want to teach on their campus, as long as they're not using public funds. And if they're willing to forego the public funds, as I said, have at it. Do your best. Do what you want to do, because I really don't care what you teach at Harvard. And parents, just beware. Don't send your kids to Harvard. I mean, it's one of the most expensive schools in the country anyway, and it's gotten so leftist, so woke, so liberal. I don't know why you'd want to send your kid there anyway. But if Harvard can make it without tax dollars, without federal funds, I think they should be allowed to do whatever they want to, as long as we're not supporting it. You agree? Email me, joey@joeyhudson.com. Text me as well. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you could trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. As we continue today's show, wrapping up another day, actually, in Holy Week. And also today, of course, April 15th. You know what that is? It is tax day. Got to get those tax returns done, or at least get an extension. That's my strategy. I always get an extension. But don't forget. Be sure and communicate with your tax professional. Hey, we've talked a lot about the tariffs over the past couple of weeks since President Trump announced his plan. And the whole idea is not to collect the tariffs for the sake of collecting the tariffs necessarily, but to try to get a lot of these manufacturers and these products manufactured here in the U.S. on our own soil to create American jobs. Well, we're already seeing some of that happen. And the latest, in an announcement yesterday, NVIDIA has made a massive move to bring AI supercomputer manufacturing back to the U.S. The tech giant said it's locking down over 1 million square feet of factory space. AI chip production will happen in Arizona, and the supercomputers themselves will be built in Texas. Now, this is a huge step in the broader push to reshore semiconductor manufacturing and reduce America's reliance on Taiwan and other overseas producers, especially as tensions with China remain high. And this is the beginning of a new era of American manufacturing, I believe. We have to start making these products, if not all of them, a good portion of them, or at least so that we're not dependent on China and some of these other countries. We have allowed ourselves to go to sleep. And now it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt for a while here until we can get the manufacturing back in the U.S. and get the supply going. We talked about just a minute ago some of the rare earths and some of the minerals, some of the things that are needed for batteries that China is in their part of trying to negotiate and strengthen their position. They've stopped exporting them. They're not just going to charge tariffs on things. They're just going to stop. And we can't allow ourselves to be dependent on China on anything. So this is good news. This is exactly what President Trump is hoping to do. The NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, said the engines of the world's AI infrastructure are being built in the United States for the first time. Adding American manufacturing helps us better meet the incredible and growing demand for AI chips and supercomputers, strengthens our supply chain, and boosts our resiliency. NVIDIA isn't doing this alone. It's partnering with other major players, we're told, to build out U.S.-based production capacity. The goal, of course, is to pump out, they say, $500 billion worth of AI infrastructure over the next 4 years. That's a pretty big goal to get up and start manufacturing this quickly and to be able to turn that much over in 4 years. President Donald Trump praised the announcement from the Oval Office, calling it a direct result of his administration's sweeping tariff policies. He said, this is what happens when you prioritize American industry. He said, taking credit for policies that he claims push companies like NVIDIA to bring their operations stateside. But while the manufacturing side is gearing up, there's still another piece of the puzzle, and that is AI is incredibly energy hungry. Data centers that fuel AI systems consume huge amounts of electricity, and the International Energy Agency estimates that AI alone will account for half of the growth in U.S. energy demand between now and 2030. That means the U.S. is going to need serious investment in energy infrastructure in order to be able to keep up. The big picture here, NVIDIA's move signals a major shift in global tech supply chain and one that puts America back at the center of AI development, exactly where we want to be. So this is just news that Trump's strategy on the tariffs is working in this industry and happening quickly. Principals at 2 Los Angeles elementary schools have blocked Homeland Security agents from their campuses over fears that they were doing immigration enforcement. But the Department of Homeland Security says that the agents were just making welfare checks on migrant kids who crossed into the U.S. alone. Several Homeland Security agents showed up at the Lillian Street Elementary and Russell Elementary in South Los Angeles on April the 7th to speak with 2 students and were quickly turned away, according to ABC 7. LAUSD Superintendent Alberto Cavarro fumed at a subsequent news conference, saying, "What interest should a Homeland Security agent have in a first grader?" They wanted access to the students to determine their well-being based on, according to the agents, the fact that when they entered this country, they entered as an unaccompanied minor. It is well known that these students are under the care of relatives, the superintendent said. But Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin, said on X that the agents were there only conducting wellness checks on the kids to ensure that they are safe and not being exploited, abused, and sex trafficked, which were not there to carry out immigration enforcement. Unlike the previous administration, President Trump and Secretary Noem take the responsibility to protect children seriously and will continue to work with federal law enforcement to reunite children with their families. Now, according to DHS, the Trump administration has so far reunited roughly 5,000 unaccompanied migrant children with family members or safe guardians after tens of thousands went missing under the Biden administration, according to McLaughlin. I mean, this is one of those issues that the Biden administration wanted to keep quiet. They love the idea of having open borders and allowing these people to pour in, and in a lot of cases, these unaccompanied minors came into a foreign country by themselves, and you don't know what's going to happen to them. And the Biden administration didn't care. The superintendent said that the feds conveyed to both principals that the parents or the legal guardians in charge of these children have provided them authorization for access to these kids in schools, but argued that their claims were blatantly untrue. He said when the principals attempted to write down details about their IDs, they quickly hid their IDs, according to the superintendent. The Biden-Harris administration lost track of more than 320,000 migrant children who crossed the border alone. 320,000 lost them. This according to an Inspector General report released last August. Migrant children who cross the border without parents are sent to the Department of Health and Human Services, which is tasked with screening their sponsors in the U.S. Some of the missing children were found to be working in exploitative conditions in slaughterhouses and factories because of the lax vetting policies that the Biden administration adopted to screen their adult sponsors. I mean, who sends their kids to a foreign country anyway, unaccompanied? Who does that? Why? I mean, do they think that their child will get such greater care over here with a stranger? Because in some of these cases, according to DHS, they're not with other family members. And that's a serious thing. I just can't imagine a parent thinking that their child is better off in America with a stranger. Now, I get it if grandma's over here or an uncle's over here, but even still, you give up your child. The children need their parents, right? Now I get it. There's probably a lot more opportunity here in the U.S. than maybe where they came from. But still, are they not better off with their parents than sending them over here into a foreign country, a strange area that speaks a different language? I don't know. I don't get it. The Trump administration has sought to address the issue and recently found that approved migrant sponsors were providing fake or doctored photos in their application. That in itself is reason to suspect that they're legitimate. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.